Hello, welcome to this week's How's the Market, Pensacola. Well, the market's the wild, wild west right now. Everybody's just going crazy. Yeah, that's not a word you're supposed to throw out right now, but here's what's happening. Has there been a shift? If you watch this show, part of the reason I did this show was to document the market. We started in April of 2019. We went all the way through, and it's been a hypersellers, hypersellers, hypersellers. Now we're starting to see a shift. So we're documenting that shift. But that shift has gotten so much news that both sides, both the sellers and the buyers, are sometimes becoming unrealistic. Unrealistic. Some of the sellers that I've worked with have given me unrealistic expectations of, hey, we want an appraisal waiver still. I'm here to tell you that appraisal waivers are a thing of the past. If you watched last week's show, you understand that. It's an appraisal waiver. What it is, hey, if a property comes in, we go into contract for $270 and it comes in at $240, then they're willing to pay the $30,000 difference, essentially overpaying. That's gone away. We're also seeing price improvements. The word improvement makes people feel better, but what it means is there's a price reduction in listing prices. Okay, so does that mean that prices are coming down? No, not necessarily. On the other hand, I've also seen a buyer that got mad at me because I was negotiating for a seller. And the buyer themselves called me, which you're not supposed to do. If you're represented by somebody, call your agent. But this one got my number, called me, and then all of a sudden was upset because my seller was not willing to take a $20,000 concession to pay for not only all their closing costs, because they put all the closing costs on the buyer's side, but then they came back and asked us for a concession basically to pay for it, but also wanted us to spend, I want to say 3 points, so 3% of their loan to buy their rate down. And said, hey, this is a hyper buyer's market, so you've got to be able to do, you're going to have to do this, or else you're never going to sell this house. And your sellers are unrealistic. Hold on, okay? Both sides are not unrealistic, and both sides are unrealistic. That seller saying that we want an appraisal waiver, unrealistic. It's not working right now. If it comes up as an appraisal and the appraisal is lower, we just have to talk about it. Do you still want to sell? Does it still make sense, or do you want to stay? As a buyer, do you think we're going to get everything? No. Are we going to get some concession? Sure. There's still limited inventory, but I want you to look at these price points. That's where these price points start to really play a factor. I said earlier this year I felt like a parrot on this show because every week it was just the hypersellers. It was all red, right? Red, 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 all hypersellers. We're starting to see different colors show up. What does that mean? That we're starting to get inventory rising, which is what buyers have been complaining, and so has the market been complaining for forever. Some sellers feel like they've missed out, and now they're reconsidering whether they want to sell or not. Well, I think maybe then you need to consider if you wanted to sell in the first place. If you're looking that it's the max, and that greed kicks in, right? I understand taking a max profit. I get that. But if the house is worth this, don't think you're going to get over anymore. We're probably not going to do that. Does it still happen? Are there exceptions to these rules all the time? Absolutely. It's one of the reasons I like real estate is because there's exceptions to everything and there's different ways to work around a whole lot of things. But both sides, I think, need to just take a step back, breathe, realize where we are. The buyers do have more control than they did. Listen to me very carefully. The buyers have more control than they did, but it is still a seller and hyper sellers market. So this is not, when I've been saying this is not 2008, 2009 all over again, and 2009 the buyers had all the power because there was 14, 24. There was one price point that had over 48 months worth of inventory. It was creeping into 50 months worth of inventory. So 4 years to clear all that inventory out. Well, buyers can pick and choose at that point. That's what makes this whole, why I go over these numbers, why I give you this quantitative data weekly important, is because you need to understand if you're a seller and you're coming on, we need to really sit down and take a look at your price point and what's happening. Okay, because we need to differentiate against other people, especially if we're starting to get into a high seller's market, not a hyper sellers where we're really, really flying, but a sellers, and then the inventory levels are still rising, creeping up on a neutral market. Would we see a neutral market this week? So we need to differentiate there. Buyers need to understand the same as they come in making offers. There may be more properties that you can take a look at. That's good. Buyers do have some more control. They do have some other properties they can look at, but for the most part, in a lot of price points, it's still a hyper seller's market. So don't go in expecting everything because the Feds raise rates. Looks like they're going to raise it at least 3/4 of a point again this month. Don't go thinking you're going to get everything on it. Just like the sellers, don't come into the conversation. This is a negotiation now. The pendulum has swung way, it used to be the buyers, swung way over to the sellers. It has swung back some, and I think that we may come back even more to like a neutral, a seller/neutral. I don't know that we're going to see a buyer's or a hyper buyer's market in any price point this year, but that has swung a little. So we need to come back to just negotiating, not, what was those jokes that I saw a video one time where this guy was saying if apples were like real estates and said, hey, I got an apple for sale. And people started bidding $2 and $5 and $10. And one guy goes, can I see the apple? And he's like, nope, here's the apple, right? You've seen the apple. That's an apple. You know what an apple looks like. It's kind of like the real estate market. You know what a house looks like. This is what it is. You can't come see it. You have to. That was way over here. That's when the sellers had all the power. No, we're going to have to start negotiating again. So it's very important for both sides to sit down with a professional and understand exactly what they want out of this transaction and what they are okay with. So what is a must and what's a want? This is a must. We must have this or we're not going to do it, okay? If I go into a negotiation and know that, okay, I can negotiate better for you. Here's my wants. I'm going to try and get you all these. But if I can't, I'm definitely going to try and get you the must. Make sense? So, now that I've talked about our inventory levels for quite a bit, why don't we jump over and take a look at them and see if we have a neutral market anywhere. Let's go. All right, if you hadn't seen the show, you don't know that I start with this slide right here. It says if we have between 6 and 7 months worth of inventory in a certain price point, we have what's called a neutral market. Anything less than 6 months is seller's market. Anything greater than 7 months is considered a buyer's market. What the slide doesn't say, anything less than 3 months is a hyper seller's market. Anything more than 9, hyper buyer's market. Let's start over here in Escambia County. We're up to almost 800 properties on the market. 800 properties on the market. Okay. 792 is where we're at. Doesn't look like we have a neutral market here. If you noticed, this price point down here last week, 650,000 to 700,000, was over 5 months inventory. We've come back down to 4.8, but we've got a new orange, and that's the 450 to 500,000. Has now creeped out of the hyper sellers market and into just a seller's market. So I told you guys as we started to see these, and go back and watch the shows. You can see them as we started to see an orange creep here in the luxury and then creep down, and we're going to see it start to creep up some more. But you go selling a $250,000 to $300,000 property, you're at 1 month's inventory, and things are still selling for 100% to 101% of inventory. Buyers, listen to me. They're still selling for 100% to 101% of list price. I think I said inventory a minute ago, but I meant list price. All right, both of these. 150,000 all the way up to 300,000. And if you look all the way down, actually, even though it's out of a hyper sellers and into a sellers, that 450,000 to 500,000 is still selling 99% to 100% of list price. That's what I mean by buyers thinking that they can come in $10,000, $15,000 under and get a bunch of concessions. No. Now, this does not take into effect concessions. Basically says purchase price. So somebody comes in at 100%, or let's say we're at 300,000 and we come in at 101%. So instead of 300, we give them 303, but then we ask for 3 back. Okay, that's still 100% a list. Those concessions, those negotiations are starting to happen again. I'm starting to see some agents that are a little newer in the business freak out because they're not quite sure how this works. So when experience comes in and who you work with matters. So anything up to $500,000, or no, excuse me, anything up to $450,000, still a hyper sellers with 400,000 to 450,000 up to 2.5 months. So we probably will see this go orange in the next few weeks. But as I've said before, after Labor Day, we probably will start to see some inventory slide because there's just holidays. That's just your traditional stuff. It's been weird the last 2 years with COVID and 2020 and all that other stuff. So it's tough to look at those the last 2 years. But if I go back into the teens, 2019, 2018, typically that's the ebb and flow. Okay, we start to see our spring buying market starts in January here and runs to about Labor Day. All right, so spring, summer buying runs to about Labor Day, and then we start to fall off for the holidays. That's where we meet the rest of the country. All right, let's jump over to Santa Rosa County. 608 active. Remember that was under 300 just a few weeks ago? We've doubled in inventory. We've doubled in inventory in Santa Rosa County. Now again, watch your headlines. I've doubled in inventory, crash imminent. Really? Because everything up to 300,000 is under a month's inventory. With the exception of 100 to 150, it's 1.4, and that's because of the work that needs to be done to these. We have 7 active total. Looks like 450 to 500,000 here is out of the hyper sellers and just into the sellers, 32%. And then our luxury at 4.3%, you got this little pocket of 600,000 to 650,000 is 4.8%. Nothing neutral yet. Nothing neutral yet. And again, if you see all this, under $100,000, you're just not finding anything. There's nothing in Santa Rosa County. Nothing. And we are still, if you look here, pretty much everything's selling 100 to 101%. You see this one pocket, 100,000 to 150,000, where we got 1.4 months. And I just told you they need some work. Well, that's actually reflective right here when you look at this quantitative data too, because it says it's selling for 95 to 96% of list. Normally, when you have properties that have that much work, yeah, that's what they're there for. So 608 total active. We've definitely started to get some inventory. This is good. This is good news. I know the sellers are freaking out, and I told you to take advantage of that stuff in the spring. But we can't do anything about what you did in the spring. We can't do anything about what you did in the past. We can only do what you do in the future and start thinking through if it's a not right time and why you want to sell. Okay, if there's an opportunity that you're taking, or if you're trying to lock in some appreciation, that's fine. All right, that's fine. There's a lot of different reasons why you would sell. I actually told 2 sellers last week. They came to me and said, hey, we're looking to lock in some appreciation on our rental properties. I'm like, great, what are you going to do with it? No, I didn't just freeze. That was the look I got. Okay, they had no idea what they were going to do with it. So I said, are you just using the capital to do something else? Or are you trying to roll it over? Because if they sold, they were going to not have a nice appreciation, but that's also a taxable event. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an accountant. Go talk to that, all right? But I do know the basics of these accountants because I'm an investor. I said, you don't know what you're going to do with it, right? Well, where are you going to put the money? I mean, we're sitting here at 9.1% inflation right now, highest we've seen in 40, 50 years. Where are you going to put the money? Because you put it in a savings account paying less than 1%, you're basically losing money. Well, that makes no sense then. You're right, it makes no sense. It made 0 sense for either one of them to sell. So I was the one person that came to them, because they interviewed 3 people, and I was the one person that came to them and said, don't sell. Just don't sell. The husband actually looked at me on one and went, wow, you're the only person I know of that's in the business and says, don't do what you do. Meaning don't sell even though I'm in real estate. Well, that's because I'm an advisor. I'm not just an agent opening a door. I'm an advisor. I've been doing this a long time. Like I said, we're coming up on 30 years on that. So I will advise people, and I know that particular client's going to wind up calling me back. He actually already sent me a text message for somebody else who's looking to sell, and they have a much different situation. So they'll refer me because they know I'm honest. I'm just going to tell you, hey, this is not right for you to sell. Could you talk about a debt restructure if we needed the capital for something else? Maybe, because that's not a taxable event. So you really need to dive into why you want to sell as a seller. And a buyer, it makes sense why we're trying to buy, because right now, even with rates higher and the Fed raising rates soon, that's not that big a deal. We are still going to appreciate in value. It may be much slower, which is I think what's causing all this pandemonium, plus the media is just fueling it. But yeah, we're not going to wind up going down in prices. I think people just need to get realistic on both sides of the house. All right, I always end the show by talking about my instant offer program. I've had 3 phone calls this week about that because all 3 properties were damaged. If you don't know anything about the instant offer program, it's basically a chance for you to talk to someone like me or from my team that we will go out and give you an instant offer on the property that can close in 10, 15, 20, 30 days. However long it wants you to close. You don't have to show the house. You don't have to do any, you don't have to repair it. You'll have no closing cost, everything, right? So we can do that. We can build all that in to an offer and tell you exactly what we can offer right now. Some people will take that, use it as a floor, then ask me to market the property, put it on the MLS, see if we can get higher. If we can, they take the higher number. If they can't, then they know they've got a floor. So if this number makes sense, great. It's just up to them whether they want to try to get better or, you know, I've always told a story about the one couple that had an awesome opportunity, but they had to be in Dallas in 10 days. And the only way to be in Dallas in 10 days was to be able to have a significant down payment. They found something like owner financing or something out there, but they had to have a significant down payment, and the only way they could do that was to sell this property and sell it quickly. So we bought it for 10 days. Everybody was happy. All right, everybody was happy. So check out the link below. I've got information on that anyways. Listen, there's a lot of changes out there. Talk with a professional. Get down and understand why you're wanting to do whichever side it is. The buyer side, what's your strategy on that? The seller side, what's your strategy on that, and why are you doing it? Whys on both are extremely important. Extremely important. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. I'm a man on a mission. My mission is to help people break through all the noise out there and don't need no permission. I want to help you get to actual truth. Don't you just want the truth?